Good evening, everyone. I'm Whitney Terrio with the Temple Chamber of Commerce, and I'm joined by Chief Sean Reynolds of the Temple Police Department and Mr. Tucker Glaske from University of Mary Hardin Baylor. And we're here tonight to talk about Leadership Temple and their class project from this last year. And it focused on mental health awareness, twofold. They did a public service announcement that was a video that played during the month of May, which is National Mental Health Awareness Month. And then the second component of it, all 12 of the Leadership Temple participants were certified in mental health first aid. So those folks are out in our community, in our businesses, and they are now advocates and able to help someone in distress. With that, I'm going to turn it over to both Chief Reynolds and Tucker. They're going to talk a little bit more about how the project evolved, and then about midway through, we'll let you see their great work.
Well, thanks, Whitney. Maybe it might be best if Tucker kind of starts a little bit, since he was our fearless leader throughout the Leadership Temple process.
I just have something real brief. I think I served as the president of the 2021-2022 class, and really my comments about how this came about is, and really from the beginning, our class has been the class was a class that really experienced things from the heart and really were driven by the heart. I noticed this when we went to, I think it was Health Services Day, stop after stop was mental health. There were just these commonalities that all kind of center back around mental health. And I remember we were sitting in a conference room as a class after third or fourth stop, and it was someone made the comment, and Chief, it may have been you, of just look how everything kind of comes back to a lot of our issues here stem from mental health. And it was felt early by the class. I think it was very much a heart thing. It was impassioned. And so I was just really proud of the class for, one, recognizing that and then wanting to act on it. It was kind of clear. Of course, we kind of talked details, kind of took a little bit longer to figure out exactly where we'd land. But I think it was pretty clear early on, Chief, and I'll let you comment on this from being in the class, but I felt like it was clear early on that mental health was it, and that was kind of the big heart thing for the class.
Yeah, I would agree. The class was it's a mixture of folks, so they have to apply. And I arrived here in June of 2020, and so one of the first things I was trying to do was figure out all the different ways that I could or should engage with the community, networking, learning people's names and faces. And so I applied for Leadership Temple in 2020, was accepted into the class, and then it was immediately canceled due to all the COVID restrictions. And as we talk about mental health, I think it's a good frame of reference for us that none of us, our kids, our teens, us, our parents, could have ever probably forecast that we would be facing really 2 years of being locked down. And the challenge was we then brought the class together, which was engineers, architects, accountants, really super smart folks that work at Baylor Scott and White in this program that's run by the Temple Chamber of Commerce. And it was really first, when you bring groups together, you've kind of got that storming, forming, norming, performing. We're trying to get to know folks, and you're only together for one day a month, essentially. And it was really apparent with the class that they all came from kind of a servant's heart mindset. And I was constantly asked, what do you see about Temple? What do you think about Temple? What do you notice? And one of the things that I noticed was three things that really stood out to me was mental health issues, homelessness, and really a loss of hope in some areas. And at the PD, we'd start putting our minds together on how do we make mental health a conversation that we should be having over the dinner table. mental health impacts all of us. Some of us are not very good at self-care. I'll be the first to admit that. It's something I constantly work on because I'm so busy. Many events, many activities, lots of stuff on my schedule. But we recognized pretty early on in the class, as we went through the various presentations and heard from folks at Polar Express and the various hospitals, that really what was coming to light was just this mental health was impacting everyone's operation, whether it was suicide ideation, substance abuse disorders, intellectual disabilities. Mental health is just a primary thing impacting everyone, and it's not talked about as much as it should be. There's still a bit of a stigma associated with mental health issues. And one of the things I want to do, even within the police department, is to make it just as common to go see a counselor, psychologist, psychiatrist as it is to go to your dentist or primary care physician. And so out of most of those conversations, really was born the idea to do something centralized around mental health.
Chief, I have a question. What do you think it's going to take for our community to have what you're talking about, just like a going to see your doctor, making mental health the awareness that high to where it's kind of like, okay, if I understand what you're saying, it's like, okay, I go to the dental office, I get my teeth checked, I go to the doctor, get my physical health, mental awareness. What steps do we need to take to get there?
I think it starts really with education and training, and not being afraid to have the conversation. One of the things that I really loved about the project that we undertook was really the way it just kind of evolved on its own. And I had missed a meeting, and then I showed up, and they were like, "Hey, we've got this idea." And I was like, "Oh, okay, let me process this a little bit." But the mental health first aid, it's not enough to do a video. And I know we're going to show the video that I think is incredibly impactful and powerful, but you have to take that step to educate yourself on really what mental illness is. And I haven't always understood it either. One of the first struggles that I experienced personally was dealing with a loved one that battled depression. And I just didn't handle that very well. I was kind of a pick yourself up by the bootstraps, go work out, change your diet. Didn't understand the neurochemical reactions that can take place in the brain. Didn't understand the impact that could have. So I handled that very, very poorly. But once I got educated on it, and started to really figure out that we as human beings, we have a tendency to compartmentalize things. So when we treat the physical person, the mental person, the emotional person, or the spiritual person, and really the focus that we should have is treating the whole person, the holistic approach. And you've seen some industries really change their mechanics on how they address the whole person perspective. But the part that I loved perhaps most about the project was it wasn't just enough to do a video. The class wanted to take some training. They had heard enough that they were curious about the process. And this is a conversation that can occur in a workplace, in a church, at home, on a ball field. It just doesn't matter. Mental health is the broad spectrum of us as human beings. And I think for a long time we've either tried to stifle it down or not really talk about it, and we've got to have honest conversations about mental health and realize that we are the most prosperous nation on the country in the world, and we are the most medicated population in the world. And those two seem slightly incongruent.
Yep.
Tucker, can you talk a little bit about the process that we went through, maybe some of the conversations that we had that led to the mental health topic?
Yeah, honestly, Chief, I think it was maybe Brian, or it was kind of like we were sitting in a room and people were just kind of flabbergasted that this was like, no one's talking about this. Like, it was the first time people were in our class, I feel like, were hearing about mental health and all its issues and impacts on our community. And I felt like there was just this frustration almost of like, how in the world are we not talking about this? And literally everything seems interconnected some way with mental health. And even for me, it was eye-opening for me. And out of that is what sprung. It was kind of out of this like frustration of like, we've got to do something. We can't just hear all this and know all this and just sit on it. That's the way I felt. Of course, the conversations, how big of a project do you want to take on? Typically these things start out really, really big, and this, okay, what's realistic? What I'm really proud about where we landed, though, was there is a video. It is about awareness, but what you talked about, Chief, it doesn't stop there. This class, and Chief, if you want to talk a little bit more about the act, so this is quite a commitment. This isn't just something you sign up for, go for 30 minutes and head out, get your sheet of paper. It is a full day. I think there's a computer part that's 3 or 4 hours. And Chief, I'll let you comment because I want people to understand what this is. And but it's a commitment, and that's what I was really proud of our class for taking the extra step to say it's this important. And now we essentially have a full class of rising leaders in our community that are cheerleaders for mental health and know how to have those conversations.
Yeah, so mental health first aid is a class that's been around for quite a bit of time, and they actually have a couple of different paths. So there's mental health for law enforcement, mental health for, I believe it's business. You can pick whichever track you want to go down, and it's a free training that's available, so there's no expense to it. If you're interested in that, you can contact Central County Services, and they can bring that free training to you. But there is a commitment to it. There's a pre-test that you take online beforehand, and I don't remember excuse me, I don't remember exactly how long it is, but maybe a couple of hours, and then there's a full day of training. And what was even cooler about folks, when we were looking at options for the training, the discussion was, I want the training so that I can go back to my workplace or in my sphere of influence, and I can be an advocate, a champion for mental health first aid. And it can be used anywhere. I've struck up conversations with folks in the grocery store that appear just to not be having a great day, or folks at my local church, or just wherever you got to meet people where they are, and sometimes the days are they're rough, and it's okay to go, hey, are you okay, and just to engage at a different level. I think many times we put the blinders on, we go about doing what we do, and we miss seeing people who might need that interaction from us. And this class will teach you how to interact with somebody who perhaps is struggling with mental health or mental illness.
And it might be you. I think that's a powerful part of this video is in the vulnerability of the class that I'm really proud of them for, is that none of us are too good for mental health. We are all prone to mental health, and the more we can talk about it. And Chief, you made that's a great point in the class throughout the year, because and we're so blessed to have you part of this class, because you're on the front lines of seeing the effects of mental health. And so to get your feedback into common, people working every day that aren't on the front lines and seeing the effects of it, we're all affected by it. And I think that's the power of this video is you have rising community leaders willing to come out and say, I struggle with mental health. It's just inspiring, and it's just an honor to be a part of it.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's helped is really it's kind of drawn this mainstream flavor to it, if you will. And Simone Biles during the Olympics actively admitted, I can't go on, I've got to work on my mental health. And other athletes are doing the same thing, and I think that helps in some way, that we normalize mental health, and that's really what we've got to do. We've got to normalize the fact that not every day is a good day. Not every day is social media and my life's wonderful and everything's perfect. None of us live a perfect life. None of us have perfect days, and to just be vulnerable. And that's the one thing that I think is key in any true relationship is that there's both parties are vulnerable with one another, and in recognition that at the end of the day, I'm just as human as you are. It doesn't matter what my role or assignment is. I have bad days. I have good days. Some days I'm sad. Some days I get some bad news. Some days somebody passes away that I'm near and dear to. I mean, we've just got to get over this ethereal approach that I've always got to be happy. I've always got to put on the front. And I think we gain more from being vulnerable with one another than we do from putting on airs.
Yeah, I agree with that. With the class, I want to speak to everyone's age and generational things. So we had our youngest was in his 20s, early 20s, and our oldest, she was in her 50s, mid to late 50s actually. So you had a range of folks across multiple generations having these really open and honest conversations about mental health, their own personal struggles. And I think there's, and Sean, I'm not speaking to your age, but I'm assuming you're maybe a little older than myself.
I think that's fair.
Well,
Just from wisdom only, just from the
mostly
sheer
being
wisdom.
so sage. But I say that not in jest, but some generations didn't talk about mental health issues. It was so taboo. You didn't have those conversations. That wasn't normal dinner time conversation. So breaking that stigma and having this diverse group of rising leaders, as Tucker said, it is fantastic for our community, and I hope that maybe now is a good time to play the video so people can see what kind of impact this group made.
Well, I would add before we play the video, it's not just generational; it can be gender specific, right? So, men typically aren't nearly as vulnerable with their emotions, and I think it can be industry specific, right? So when you talk about first responders industries, fire, PD, EMS, we get so good at kind of suppressing the emotionality to address what we're faced with or what we're dealing with. I mean, that's not healthy either. You have to have an opportunity to offload or ventilate the emotional context and content of whatever you have experienced. And we don't do a great job of creating safe environments for that. When I was a young man, it was rub some dirt in it, shake it off, you'll be just fine. And if I can evolve, and the class can evolve, and we can evolve, my hope is that we all can evolve a little bit.
And I think what helps with that is exposure.
Yeah.
And I think that's what happened in this class is you're exposed to it, and it goes from there.
Did you know 1 in 5 Americans suffer from a diagnosable mental health condition?
Is it me?
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 1 in 20 experienced a serious mental illness.
1 in 15 experience both substance use disorder and mental illness.
1 in 8 of all visits to the U.S. emergency departments are related to mental and substance use disorders.
70% of youth in the juvenile justice system have at least one mental health condition.
37% of people incarcerated in state and federal prison have a diagnosed mental condition.
Depression is a leading cause of disability worldwide.
I have struggled with depression.
I've struggled with anxiety.
I have struggled with my mental health.
We all have it. Why are we so afraid to discuss it?
40,000 Americans die by suicide every year. It is the 5th leading cause of death for ages 49 to 59.
12 million plus had serious thoughts of suicide.
The LGBTQI population is at a higher risk than the heterosexual population for suicidal thoughts and suicide attempts.
Veterans comprise 22.2% of all suicides.
Why do we confuse a cry for help for a cry for attention?
Why can't I just be happy?
Why do I feel so worthless?
Why do I feel like I'm failing?
Talk. Listen. Ask.
You can save someone's life.
Your neighbor, your friend,
A veteran.
Your employee.
We care.
Ask for help. The Suicide Prevention Hotline is available 24/7, 365 by simply dialing 988.
Call the Lifeline phone number 1-800-273-8255.
Call the NAMI helpline at 1-800-950-NAMI.
Central County Services mainline phone number 1-254-298-7000.
Toll-free crisis hotline at 1-800-888-4036.
If you are considering suicide, please call.
So that video always gives me a little bit of pause. Largely because of my experiences in the military and law enforcement. So, suicide as being one of the leading causes of death doesn't make a lot of sense to most of us, to include myself. I've grown to understand it a little bit more over the years, but every death that's lost by suicide is a preventable death. If we had just had the right connection point, the right contact, if somebody had been willing to reach out or be vulnerable. And part of it is having the courage to ask folks, are you okay? We often have those hallway conversations, right, where you're, hey, how you doing today? And everybody says, I'm fine, you know. And I was probably 10 years into my career in law enforcement before somebody actually sincerely and honestly asked me, are you okay? And I wasn't. And one of the things that I think all of us need to get better at is addressing the trauma at a time that's close to when the trauma happened. The longer we wait to address trauma or the bad things that occur to us or those negative things, it can really be like, I always describe it like scar tissue. So if you get a cut on your hand, you would treat it, right? I mean, you'd either go to the doctor or you'd get some Neosporin and you'd treat it so that it heals properly. But emotional wounds aren't like that. If we don't treat them appropriately, then you get scar tissue built up. And if you re-traumatize or exposed to so many negative things, eventually that scar tissue builds up and becomes debilitating. So it's critically important that we recognize when negative things happen and when trauma occurs, and not necessarily shy away from those discussions, but have an honest conversation and be willing to go talk to a professional should we need to. So I was incredibly impressed by the thoughtfulness that went into the video, our partners at TISD that helped produce the video for us, our classmates that set up the scheduling for that. It's no easy logistical challenge, and just the importance of the message that goes out, and that everyone was willing to be vulnerable in their own way to get this important message out. So I'm incredibly grateful for the class and my classmates and the Temple of Chamber of Commerce and TISD and the students and staff at TISD at Temple High that helped produce that video. But even during the video production, there were moments where we had to stop filming because folks would reflect back on something in their own life that was deeply powerful for them, still incredibly raw and emotional, but they still wanted to do it.
Just a real quick question, Chief. It just seems like so much of this comes back to getting out of our own life sphere of importance. If we could just step out for one quick second, we'd see all the pain and people are going through great challenges around us. Do you have any advice for people like me and so many others that what are steps we can take to get out of our own little bubble for long enough to realize that there's other people with pain and trauma and going through a lot?
So I hear a couple of things come to mind when you ask that. One is be where your feet are. We're so digitized and overstimulated and so overscheduled that it's really hard to take in where you are at the time. I know I feel this way many times during my day, as my schedule is generally booked from 7 in the morning sometimes till 8 o'clock at night. And if you're not intentional about taking the time to be where you are and listen to the folks that are in your area at that time, you'll miss things. You'll lose things. When I've got a couple of friends that just check on me from time to time, just send me a quick text, send me a quick voicemail. They'll try and reach me on the phone. I think when you know folks are hurting or going through something, give them a call. I try and call if I know of something with somebody. I try and make just a quick phone call, and if I can't get a hold of them, I leave just a quick message. Hey, I'm encouraging you. I'm here. Call me if you need me. Those little things in our society would really go a long way. I mean, let's be honest. We're probably the most divided in this country than we've ever been, and it's going to take grace and being present and being willing to have really difficult conversations with each other to understand where we're all coming from. And I talk about three things almost daily in the police department: relationship, trust, and communication. Everything begins with a relationship. From relationships, you can build really good trust, and from trust, you can get to really good communication. And those are critically important, but I see so many folks, including myself, that we get so busy with our phones, we're missed an email, we've got to respond, that we miss out on the beauty and the wonder of the opportunities that are perhaps right in front of us. We were able to do this video in conjunction with, was it Mental Health Awareness Month?
Yes.
So we were able to, and then we showed it at.
So the class had the opportunity to show the video at the Central Texas Community Health Summit, Connecting the Dots 5.0, which was held at the Central Texas Council of Governments. And what that is so regional health departments from the SITCOG region. So I believe it's a seven county. Region 7. So multiple counties involved, their health departments and medical services, police departments, sheriff department, other law enforcement. And the whole theme of that summit was mental health. So it was a perfect beginning to their summit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was played. It was really a resounding success. I still continue to hear from folks that have seen the video or been exposed to it that are just really appreciative. And I think the opportunity that none of this would have taken place had it not been for Leadership Temple, one. Mm-hmm. And the process that we walked through with the classmates, the drafting and writing and reviewing of a script, and much of the information is available on the NAMI website, NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental, and I can't remember what the I stands for, But these statistics, when you really start to dive into them, they're fairly staggering, and they have real impacts on a community and real impacts on hospitals and law enforcement and EMS and fire departments, and businesses. We've got to be intentional and strategic about how we care for each other, how we talk to each other, and those opportunities that exist to continue to educate our workers, our employees, and to treat them holistically versus kind of the siloed and segmented, which is easier for us to do, but to develop kind of a holistic mindset. I think that's really how we get through this together, how we rebuild our workforces, and what'll really change the conversation.
And I think where a lot of this starts is like, if you're out there, like, what do I do now? I'm sitting in my living room, I'm watching this. What's the next step for me? And a lot of times I think that first step seems almost too big, which is to jump into a class, But so I think there is a step in between that, and I think it's experience. I think what affected our group is that we experienced something real. We saw it, we smelt it, we're up close and personal to it. Chief sees that all the time. I guess my question is, where's a good, so Leadership Temple exposed that and kind of gave us a pass into that. It's not necessarily maybe feasible for everyone to do that if you're not in Leadership Temple. Is there from the experience standpoint, to see it up close, do you have any thoughts, either of you, on where to start?
So if you have access to the internet, you can just Google suicide prevention or mental health, and you'll get a litany of websites that will pop up that can kind of walk you through and educate yourself on it. You can go to Central County Services. They've got a lot of information on their website as well. For me, it was that personal moment up close of really, really damaging a deeply personal relationship because I was ignorant, because I hadn't taken the time to educate myself on what was going on with this loved one. So that was an incredibly powerful moment for me. And then I had some wonderful mentors along the way who really guided me on spirituality, wellness, and vitality in law enforcement. And that was Sam Feemster, who is a massive man, a wonderful person. But he was a FBI agent, a pastor, and a lawyer. And he kind of taught me how to look at situations different, how to bring compassion and empathy really to the forefront in trying to navigate these types of events. And so you can get a litany of books that have been written on all these topics. If you need, you can call me. I'll be happy to help guide you.
I will say this about Chief: he's serious about that. He really is. He responds. If you email him, he responds. If you text him, he responds. So he's serious. If you do have questions or where to get involved, Chief really is a great resource for that.
And we've changed some things even inside the police department. So we've added a mental health co-responder, which is a unique partnership that we have with Central County Services, where we have a qualified mental health person inside the police department. They don't stay over at CCS. They have an office. They're inside the police department, and they're there generally Monday through Friday from 8 to 5. So there's another resource for you. Her name is Tanitha Payton. If you call down to the police department, ask to speak with her. I think she's out of town next week. But if you call down, she would be happy to kind of guide you. And what she's there to do is help law enforcement navigate the many situations that we face. And she brings just a different level of expertise to situations that may be mental health, could be a behavioral health emergency, and trying to navigate the very limited resources that we have in the Central Texas region to try and the ultimate goal is to provide folks, get them to the next level of care so that they can get the help they need.
Can you talk a little bit more about maybe strategy moving forward with the police force? And do you know anything about the county's diversion center that they're planning?
I haven't heard. I believe that plan is still moving forward. But a diversion center, in its most base, you can have all kinds of different protocols, but in its baseline format, it would be if we run into folks that have a mental health emergency, perhaps they've committed a low-level crime, instead of taking them to jail or an emergency room, which is generally not the two best places to take somebody that has a persistent and severe mental health issue, is we could have the diversion center where they could go and get care and treatment that's proximate to the crisis. So that is a big deal. I'm incredibly proud that Bell County has kind of taken that on. Again, I haven't had an update on it in a while. And I'm also incredibly proud of the city of Temple. They have undertaken a project, a strategic planning process that deals with mental health and homelessness. Those two topics are inextricably connected. As much as we may want to try and divide them, they are deeply connected topics, and so that process is already underway. We've received an initial findings from Dr. Margit, who's sharing it with multiple different groups right now. I'm really excited about the direction that we're headed, and there's been some real leadership shown in taking on these topics from both the county as well as the cities of Temple and Killeen.
That's fantastic. Thank you. So basically what I'm hearing, we just need to think of people first, right? Put people first, think of people first, ask people how they're doing, be present in what we're doing, and be vulnerable and have conversations that are hard to have. And I think that applies in our personal lives and in the business world. And I'm going to speak to one thing with the business world real quickly. We recently at the Chamber of Commerce did a survey of some of our major employers. And it was a one-question survey that had select the most critical topic and rank the topics 1 to 5, what's most critical. And mental health for employees was on that list, and it was number 1 on everyone's list. So probably pandemic induced, and this is my opinion, but you think, like Chief alluded to earlier, we were locked down for so long. We didn't have a whole lot of human interaction, and we're social beings, and it was abnormal. So it is having effects on the workforce now. But I think that holistic approach and people first that's got to be the key, right?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I absolutely agree with that, and I think it's on it's on business leaders, it's on churches, it's on each of us, leaders in our community. I would say, man, how encouraging would it be for a working population out there to have their boss or their boss's boss or the leader of their entire company talk about mental health. I think that opens up the conversation. So I think it's on presidents of company. I think it's on our mayor, city council, anybody in a leadership position. I think if it starts talking, if it's a discussion at that level, I think inevitably it'll descend down to everyone. I think everyone I think needs to be talking about it, but I especially think if our leaders start talking about it, it really opens the conversation up as well.
Yeah, I think like so many things, it's about engaging in a different way. Being able to talk about things. I always find that one of the most stimulating things about building a relationship, and I think I mentioned this earlier, is that one party is going to have to be vulnerable with the other for that relationship to really cement. And while most times it's great if that relationship can occur organically. There are some times where we need to intervene, and we need to interact, and we need to interject ourselves, and it can be really scary to do so. But you have to have that personal courage to engage, and that's one of the things we talk with law enforcement officers all the time. I always ask them, who's going to know first if an officer's having a problem? Will it be you or will it be me? And they're like, well, me. Okay, well, you got to have the personal courage to caretake for your brother or your sister. And when you see their behavior is not as normal, there's nothing wrong with asking, hey, what's going on with you? And they may not tell you anything, but at least they know you've seen something and you cared enough to follow it up and ask them. And so I really think being honest, being vulnerable, and having that personal courage, which for most people is the scariest, I think, they're like, that's just Tom, or no, that's not right, or Tom seems a bit off today. To have that personal courage to confront somebody, if you will, head on, and I don't mean physically, but I mean asking them, interjecting yourself into whatever they're going through. You always have the option, and that's what mental health first aid will train you. It'll teach you on how to have a conversation, how to communicate, and how to kind of get a feel for, okay, this looks like this, and then how to get them to the next level of care. You always have the option to call law enforcement, mental health services, 911, but imagine what it would be like if we just cared for each other like that on a daily basis and could be where our feet are. I think it'd be pretty awesome.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think you've already said it, but the courage shown by the participants and their vulnerability in filming the video, that's just the first step for these rising community leaders, and hopefully it does have a positive trickle effect in the community.
And I think it starts at the top. I think Temple Chamber, Rod, and Whitney, your leadership, it's wonderful to be a part of a group that fosters these kind of conversations, fosters these experiences. I would say everyone that was a part of this, their lives have been changed. This community has also been changed because you have a group of leaders. So I just, from the top, Chief, just you being involved, it was just incredible, the resource that and the heart. If your friend was a lawyer, pastor, and was he law enforcement too? I think you have pastor and law enforcement down. You just may need to go get the law degree, but I definitely think. But you're such a resource, and you have a heart that cares for our community. So, along with you, thank you for all that you contributed to this project.
Well, right back at you. You were our leader and guider as we navigated through all those courses and sessions, and I'm just grateful for Rod, Whitney, the two leaders that we had, and we thank you for the opportunity to be with you tonight. So bless everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you all.